After I read you a portion of this article based on an analysis released late last week by the Institute for Policy Studies, you're going to fully understand what the CARES Act was for. There seems to be a lot of confusion out there as to what exactly was going on with the CARES Act, and there were a lot of people who were defending Bernie's vote, for example. It was inexcusable. It was inexcusable because what you're about to hear now is the real reason why we had the CARES Act, why we had the COVID bailouts, why the Federal Reserve did what they did. So look at this. As the COVID-19 pandemic overtook the U.S., it brought with it an unprecedented financial crisis and unemployment rates at their highest level since the Great Depression, especially among Black, Hispanic, and Asian workers. 16.8%, 17.6%, and 15% in May compared to 12.4% for whites. At least 45 million people have filed for unemployment since the pandemic began. 45 million! Yet between March 18th and June 17th, as the pandemic raged, the combined wealth of the 614 U.S. billionaires increased by $584 billion, according to an analysis released late last week by the Institute for Policy Studies, a progressive think tank based in Washington, D.C. That's $500 billion it went up. The researchers calculated the billionaires' wealth gains based on real-time data from Forbes. Experts said the wealth of the richest Americans is tied more closely than the rest of America to the stock market, which crashed at the onset of the crisis but has rallied since, largely detached from the broader economic picture. Now do you see what the CARES Act was for? Now do you see what the Federal Reserve did and why they did it? This is the whole point. This was the whole point. So as 45 million Americans lost their jobs, the real unemployment rate is over 20%. And by the way, a lot of people who still have jobs took giant pay cuts. 20%, 30% pay cuts across the board. At least. As that was happening, the billionaires in the U.S. gained $500 billion in wealth. Their wealth went up. Why? Socialism, baby. When the Federal Reserve, the central bank, steps up and says, listen, we're not going to stop here. We're going to do endless what's called quantitative easing, which is just a fancy way of saying what's effectively a central bank subsidy, which is just, we're just going to throw money at the problem. So they said, hey, if we have to keep the stock market afloat, we'll pump in $1 trillion a day. A day. So you had $1 trillion a day being pumped in to stabilize the markets. You had Congress step up and say, yeah, we're going to do the CARES Act. We're going to do this massive, what is effectively a $5 trillion bailout of the industries. Top-down bailouts, not bottom-up, because bottom-up bailout would be give money to the people. None of that. And this was the result. This was the real reason why they did it. Guys, Naomi Klein wrote a book called The Shock Doctrine, where she explains how capitalists exploit tragedies, natural disasters, acute crises. They step in, they scream bloody murder. Oh my God, we gotta do something, we gotta do something. We don't do this, everything's gonna go crazy, everything's gonna die, we're all gonna beat this terrible, we gotta do this now. And what do you get when they do stuff like that? Endless wars, for example. Wall Street bailouts, for example. And this time, the endless Federal Reserve quantitative easing for the market and the COVID bailouts, the CARES Act, which, again, propped up industry and propped up billionaires. So this is the whole reason why they did it. They exploited a tragedy. They exploited a tragedy to solidify their stranglehold on the economy. Giant, giant, giant reverse Robin Hood move. By the way, this isn't exactly a fair graphic here. These people are billionaires, but like, I don't know, is it Kylie Jenner or something? Like, I don't know if these ones in particular are, you know, the biggest beneficiaries, but nonetheless, the billionaires who live in this country gained, I'm sorry, I said almost $500 billion. No, over $500 billion, because it's $584 billion. Over $500 billion in wealth they gained as everybody in the rest of the country is getting obliterated. This is the corporate socialism that Bernie and Richard Wolff talk about. where the government and the Federal Reserve lets the industries and the captains of industry know, no matter what, you guys won't fail. You guys won't fail. The people, they're already deeply entrenched in Failsville. But you guys will not fail. This is the kind of economy we've set up. And just so everybody understands, the reason why this happens and the reason why they get away with it is because the billionaires and the corporations own the politicians, which is why they got bailed out as everybody else was screwed. Because the billionaires and the corporations have been giving money to the politicians for years for them to run their campaigns. And so it's I scratch your back, you scratch mine. So they turned around in this crisis and took advantage of it to hand the keys to the treasury over to the billionaires and the corporations. And that's what we're seeing. You could have done a bottom-up bailout. Could have gave money directly to the people. Could have done a UBI. Could have done Medicare for all. Could have nationalized wages. Like Germany did. They didn't do it. Because those governments are representing their people. Our governments are representing the billionaires and the corporations. And now you know exactly why they did the CARES Act and exactly why they did the giant Federal Reserve quantitative easing program. This is why.